This is video 20.3 and hopefully the last video for our Gilded Age unit covering farmers and more specifically the Populist Party. So this is Miss Blanchard. Let's begin. So between 1890 and 1892, these farmers' alliances, the Knights of Labor, the National Colored Farmers Alliance, Southern Farmers Alliance, and other organizations come together to coalesce as the People's Party. It's a little too narrow-sighted to see them only as a farmers' party, because you see with things like the inclusion of the Knights of Labor, they also felt that they represented the demands of labor and urban interests. The People's Party platform calls for the government ownership of railroads, banks, and the telegraph, the 8-hour workday, and a graduated income tax and other reforms. And as the People's Party, they're going to take on the name of the Populists. And the Populists emerge as a powerful third party in the United States. Then they successfully elect several governors, congressmen, and senators, and dominate a lot of the western and plain states' legislatures. And in 1892, they even launch a third-party candidate, which most of you did a little research on, and that candidate is James Weaver. Most of the western states, the pool between the Democrats and the Republicans, especially the Democrats, which would have been more in line with most farmers' interests, is too strong to the two large major parties. Despite that, Weaver is still able to outright win 4 states and get some electoral votes in 2 other states. Cleveland, though he's not going to win the majority of the popular vote, which we took a look at that trend earlier, is going to win the election, mainly because of the unpopular tariff that had been passed during Harrison's presidency. And so Cleveland's going to be the president through the Panic of 1893. He's the president who issued the injunction against the striking Pullman workers. But the Populist Party is down, but not out completely. They have lots of governors, lots of state legislatures. But they're going to fail to get the black vote in the South. A lot of African Americans associate them too closely with the Democratic Party and still praise the Republican Party for bringing in the radical Reconstruction, bringing in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment during and after the Civil War. Southern Democrats pull strongly to the Democratic Party and are going to help win Cleveland the election because they appeal to other white voters by what's known as waving the bloody flag, reminding white Southerners about the Civil War caused by the Republicans. And of course, by 1892, Jim Crow is entrenched deeply enough in the South that African American Southerners are really going to be disenfranchised and not have a very strong representation in the electoral vote. And even a lot of Midwestern farmers don't vote populist because, again, going back to this pool of the two-party system. So upon his election, Cleveland calls for and receives the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which had alienated so many of the Southern and Western Democrats from the party. And a lot of Americans are really going to see the Populists as this platform of lunacy. You have too many competing organizations and ideals to really form a cohesive party. But that's going to change substantially in 1896 with the populist candidate William Jennings Bryan. Bryan is going to be one of the candidates for the Democratic nomination. He is the pro-populist candidate. McKinley was going to become the Republican candidate and ultimately win the election. But at the Democratic National Convention, William Jennings Bryan, he gets up and delivers one of the greatest political speeches of all times and certainly of the 19th century. Often called the Cross of Gold speech, he incites Americans that behind us we have the producing masses, and that's both the farmers and industrial workers. We will answer their demand for the gold standard. And in probably one of the most famous lines in politics, he says at the crowd, "You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon this cross of gold." And this is where the speech gets the name the Cross of Gold speech. He's saying that American farmers will not be crucified by gold, supporting instead the free and unlimited coinage of silver, a graduated income tax, and attacking trusts and other injunctions. Bryan's going to visit 26 states on a whistle-stop campaign in the United States, advancing things like this 16-to-1 ratio and all of these other planks in the Populist and now Democratic Party convention. And this cross of gold speech is going to earn him the Democratic nomination. And the gold versus silver issue is going to be the issue of the 1896 election. Do we vote for silver, prosperity of the United States on the left, or is Bryan just the farmer's friend, the silverite radical, against the pro-gold McKinley Republicans, sometimes known as gold bugs? So in response to Bryan's whistle-stop campaign, McKinley is going to wage a front porch campaign from Ohio and use the press to reach a lot of voters. He's going to advocate economic, urban, and industrial growth and arouse the fear that free silver victory would result in a massively deflated 57-cent dollar. So this becomes the basis for the 1896 election. This cross of gold farmer's friend on the left for the Democratic Party, and McKinley, who's seeming to offer commerce and civilization on the right. And the result is, well, mixed. It's a tight race. You have minor candidates in the United States, but really, McKinley now, he does finally receive a majority of the vote. This is the first time really since the 1860s where any presidential candidate has received a majority of the vote. And you can really have to go back to Buchanan's election, because remember, Lincoln hadn't received a majority of the votes either in 1860, and in the 1864 election, the Southerners had succeeded. And it is a sweeping electoral victory, but Bryan's message was pretty clear, and he was finally able to unite the Southern white Democrats as well as Western farmers. The election of 1896 essentially killed the Populist Party. The election of 1896 effectively killed the Populist Party. They weren't able to win a candidate, a national election. And in the coming year, the Klondike Gold Rush is going to solve a lot of the populist issues with the free gold and free silver issue, because it's going to release so much gold into the American economy. But a lot of the key populist ideas of graduated income tax, a secret ballot, and direct election of senators is going to be enacted by other parties and taken up by the progressives who are emerging now in the 1890s. The McKinley administration benefited from an improving economy, largely as no result of their own doing, better cotton production, and this Klondike Gold Rush and the discovery of gold. The election of 1896 cements the Republican rule. You're going to have McKinley, who's elected to 2 terms, though assassinated a few months into his 2nd term, replaced by Teddy Roosevelt, who's elected in his own right, and then eventually Taft, and becomes the party of prosperity, something they're going to invoke in the 1920s. And from 1860 to 1890s, Republicans promote industry, but by 1900, a tide is turning in the United States, and now the idea is going to become to regulate it. McKinley is an activist president who in some respects becomes one of the first modern presidents. He communicates well with the press. He's going to lead America through the Spanish-American War that brings the United States immense respect on the world stage. And the Gold Standard Act of 1900 is going to end the silver controversy once and for all. So in conclusion, you have a decade of change in the 1890s. You have the Depression of 1893, the rise of the Populist Party, and continuing and exacerbating urbanization, industrialization, and immigration really changed the character of American life. And many embrace the need for social reform, which will open the doors to the progressive era.